Battles in the two deep, defensive line, pass rusher, inside linebacker, cornerback, receiver, running back. Who's going to win those battles? Who do I think is going to make a move up the depth chart?
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. Thank you for being here with me. My name is Ryan Harings. I'm your host. This is the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you so much for being a part of this community that we're building together, Badger fans. It's incredible, and I'm so grateful to be a part of it with you. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is hooking you up all summer long. It's not the busiest sports time, but FanDuel's got your back. Boosts or bonuses daily over at FanDuel.com. Something for somebody, everybody, every day, all summer long over at FanDuel.com. Okay, let's get into it. Let's talk some of these depth chart battles that I'm really interested in. I think a lot of the big questions have been answered, but there are some real depth chart 2D battles that I think are fascinating. I want to start with extending like major gratitude. So I was in Platteville the last week watching practice as a lifetime Badger fan. That was just like a thrill and an honor. And it's certainly something that it enables me to do a better show, have more insight into the program and speak more clearly on, what we're seeing. But I want to extend a major amount of gratitude to Patrick Herb, Nate Jenelik, definitely those guys for helping hook up media access and just being very, very appreciative and grateful and gracious. Not grateful, gracious with their time. A bunch of media guys I got to meet were super nice and open and welcoming. Guys like Kokorowski and Colton Bartholomew and Nick Osen, Heilprin and Temple, like just super grateful. And then I want to special thank you to Potosi, the brewing company down there, makers of Varsity Ale, the NIL beer for the Badgers. First of all, it's a delicious beer, and I'm not getting anything out of saying that. I'm just telling you it's a great beer. But we got to tour the facility, and it's awesome. I highly encourage everyone to go down there if you're a fan of just history, of beer, of the Badgers, whatever it is. Super grateful for all of that. Okay, let's get into some of these depth chart battles. Running back. I want to start here because I think this one's fascinating. And I had kind of written Cade Yacamelli off in a way, and not even that I don't like him. Yacamelli's got a lot that, goes for him. He's got good size, good athleticism. He's pretty quick. He can catch the ball, multi-sport athlete in high school, good testing numbers in high school. He moved around a little bit. Obviously, he came to Wisconsin on the defensive side, got switched to running back. I just don't know where these reps are all going to go. So let's start with what we know in the running back depth chart. We know it's Tywee and Ches at the top. Like it's going to be those two dudes. Coach Fickle talked about it, how happy he was to see Ches get back out there, how hard he was running. We all saw what Tywee Walker did this last week. Some combination of those two are your starters. Jackson Akers not going anywhere. I keep saying it, and I keep kind of thinking people are writing him off, or we've upgraded the athleticism so much. Is it really going to be a role there? Yeah, he's running really hard. He's big. He's physical. He can catch the ball. He'll step up and stone somebody. They were using him with the ones and the twos. Like he was getting, he's absolutely playing a role. And they used him in some power back situations near the goal line where they were giving him with the ones, giving him the ball and just letting that 6'1", 6 foot frame power it into the end zone. So you got those three. I think the four guy, man, I think they're going to start with Yak and they're going to sprinkle in the two freshmen. And I think that's the depth chart. I think the two freshmen get enough carries where they're breaking past that 4-game freshman role. Like they're getting past the redshirt because again, next year, this running back depth chart is going to look dramatically different, right? You're going to lose those two guys at the top. Who knows? You could end up counting on Dupree and Jones a ton next year, so they're going to get reps. They're going to get sprinkled in. Absolutely, I think in games where if Wisconsin can get up on Western Michigan, if Wisconsin can get up on a Big Ten foe, but maybe it's a Northwestern or a Minnesota, whoever it might be. I mean, I think in those moments, you're absolutely going to see if there's an opportunity where the score is getting to a point where you can feel pretty comfortable. Those freshmen are going to come in and get reps and build because they are the future. Fickle loves them. This coaching staff loves them. They looked great, but I just don't know if you're going to unseat that top four, at least at the beginning of the year. And I wouldn't have said that. I wouldn't have said that in the spring. I think Jackson Akers made tremendous strides and he looks great. And I don't think he's going anywhere. I think Cade Yacamelli is fighting like hell for reps. And, he had a couple really nice practices last week. When he gets the ball, he generally looks the part. So I think that's the top four, and those freshmen are just going to have to fight for what's left, right? Scraps at the table, essentially. After the king and the king's men have eaten, you get what's left. Let's go defense line. I think this one's interesting, and this is one I've talked quite a bit about. Concerns at the defensive line, right? Is it going to be deep enough? Are there enough bodies there? How are they going to hold up? I think it's better than I'd given it credit for. Like, I'm always going to keep it real. Like, if I have a take and then I see something or someone I talk to I really trust, or I'm not going to die on hills, right? I don't think that's not honest, and that's listen. I takes change, opinions change. I think the defense line depth is better than I thought it was. I'm curious who the top six are. And the reason I'm going with six is nominally, if you're playing a 3-3-5, you want at least a couple waves of bodies. Now, are the Badgers always going to be in a 3-3-5? Absolutely not. They're going to be in a 2-4-5 at times. I know they've played around with situations where they have one bigger defensive lineman in and they put a couple outside linebackers, kind of hands in the dirt type thing to get more of those linebackers out there. So they're going to mix and match. But let's just say there are games against Iowas, against Nebraskas, and if you end up playing maybe a Michigan at some point, obviously not in the regular season, but there are games where you have to be more stout. You have to stop the run. So in a 3-3-5, who do I think are the top six? Let's start with the obvious ones. It's James Thompson Jr. It's Kurt Neal, who, by the way, Kurt Neal had a pretty good last week of practice. He had made a couple plays. He moves pretty well. It's Brandon Lane, absolutely, is in that top six. I've got Cade McDonald, Ben Barton. That's five. Who's that sixth body? And I think at that point you're talking, is it an Elijah Hills, right? The transfer came in from Albany. Is it a Dylan Johnson potentially stepping in? Had some nice reps. Still a freshman though, but he carries his weight pretty well. Sadly, I don't think it's a Jamel Howard. We were kind of waiting for that light to click on. We were kind of waiting for the big bot. And man, would it be nice, right? Man, would it be nice if, in his second year in the program, he was kind of stepping into that role in the interior defensive line. It would be huge. Like, even if he wasn't tracking as a star, potentially getting major rotational minutes from him this year, well, that would be your top six and give you a couple really big, stout bodies you could count on. It's a bit of a bummer. But that's college football. Not everybody develops at the same pace. And certainly the book is not written on him, but I do think it's fair to be a little disappointed he's not higher in the depth chart, given his recruiting pedigree and just kind of his body type. So I think your top five, and then I'm going to say that sixth body for me is going to be Elijah Hills right now, ahead of the freshman Johnson. Ernest Willer at one point might have been in this conversation, but they shifted him to outside linebacker. So I think that's your top six. I think it's a little better than I thought. That's kind of based on Brandon Lane. Really, really looked good. I thought Curtis Neal looked good. So there's some moments there. Elijah Hills flashed a little bit at practice. Cade McDonald, Ben Barton are solid. And, both guys that have nice length. They'll create some issues in the passing lanes. So I think that's your top six at defense line, and there's at least depth there. And again, they're not always going to be in a 3-3-5. They're not always going to have three defensive linemen, on the field anyway, with the depth and the plethora of linebackers we have. I almost just went Three Amigos there. If anybody knows the plethora bit from Three Amigos. Anyway, I moving on. We're going to take a quick break there for our friends of the show. We're going to come back and we're going to talk a little bit about receiver depth chart, inside linebacker depth chart. Again, continuing on these really, to me, super interesting battles behind maybe some of the starters. Like, who's fighting tooth and nail for those two deep spots? Who are we going to see in the field this year? Because that's really the guys you're going to see in the field this year. We're going to get into that next on Locked On Badgers, receivers and inside linebackers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show over at FanDuel. FanDuel remains the number one source. Like, if you want to spice up your sports weekend, have a little more fun with sports in the summer, go check out some lines, get the pulse of the betting community. FanDuel.com is where to go. It's an official sports betting partner of the Locked On Podcast Network, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Like, come on, that's pretty legit right there. Futures, parlays, spreads, teasers. Plus, like I mentioned, FanDuel's here for you this summer. We know the sports aren't as sportsy in the summer, right? Sports aren't sportsing like they should be sportsing in the summer. There's a lot more sports in other times of the season. So FanDuel's here to make the most of your summer. Boosts and bonuses daily over at FanDuel.com. Like I always said, please do it responsibly, but FanDuel is the number one source. If you want to do any type of sports betting, that's where we go. That's where I've gone. I have an account. Like, that is the ultimate spot. Again, please do it responsibly. Head over to FanDuel.com. Start making the most of what's left of your summer. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball and the Locked On Podcast Network. All right, Let's get into some more of these positional battles. Let's talk. Let's talk receiver. Receiver to me is again. All these are really interesting to me. I think on the inside, nominally, you're going to see mostly some type of Pauling, some type of Tretch. And if you're going four wide, I think you're going to use those two. Maybe you go trips on one side and you stack the two of them, or you have each in a slot. I think that makes a lot of sense to me. And then listen, we saw some bursts from Kyle Barry Johnson as probably that backup interior slot guy. Always great to have depth. Always great to have more options. He's small. He's a little smaller than I thought he would be. He's definitely slight, but he can run, he can move, and he can get in and out of cuts quickly. They did use him in a receiver screen off to the left side. That was with the ones or the twos where they put him in motion and got it to him quickly. So I think they understand what they have there. There's some quickness in a bottle. But yeah, I think it's going to be Church and Pauling. The real question is on the outside, right? When you got the X and the Z receiver, who are going to be the X's? Who are going to be the Z's? And the X is typically kind of that the X is usually kind of your alpha. Like that's not true for every offense, right? And Pauling is definitely this receiving room's alpha. But that X is going to be the one lined up on the line of scrimmage. Typically, he's going to be the guy who's going to be a little closer to physical coverage. I think in a perfect world, that's Bryson Green. Right, that's Bryson Green. I think that's kind of where he's going to be. Can he step up? Like what can we get from Bryson Green? And who's the backup there? I think the backup there is maybe CJ Williams. And then on the other side, the Z's, maybe Vinny Anthony. He's kind of that faster move receiver. So those three on the outside, Bryson and CJ kind of filling that more physical X spot, and maybe Vinny being the Z. I don't fully know, I'll be honest, what Phil Longo uses for designations, but yeah, I think those are probably your boundary receivers. Unfortunately, Quincy Burrows, I've had a lot of people ask me about Quincy Burrows. He's been hampered with injuries, and he's got the body type you're looking for on that outside receiver, right? 6'3", 6'2", big, fast. He's just been a little banged up, and he hasn't been able to get a ton of reps, which is unfortunate. Maybe that changes in the next week. I'll say this. He is the physical body type to flip the race and get into the mix of this if he can just get healthy and get the reps and be consistent with it. Joseph Griffin Jr., the kid from Boston College that transferred in, probably not going to be his year. He still has a year of eligibility after this, right? So this doesn't mean this is not like an insurance case where you just write off the car and say, no, total it. No, send it in. Nothing here. Total it. So maybe next year, maybe it's just a combination of coming in, not getting enough reps quick enough. He came in kind of late. There's a lot of receivers ahead of him. But probably not this year, right? So it's really on the outside. You're looking at Bryson, I think CJ and Vinny, and it's going to be some combination of those guys. What I think is interesting is where Chris Brooks, and that's where I wanted to go, fits into this rotation potentially, because he was a guy that was making waves last year until he got hurt. The staff liked him last year, and all he's done this season is continue to flash when given opportunities. I'm telling you, he's got mitts like Ken Griffey in center field. Like he catches it if it hits his hands. He's really strong, physical, looks the part. They're definitely the type of player, like you're going to send him off the bus as one of your first guys in the receiver room, right? Like you're just going to say, hey, let's lead off with Chris Brooks and let him know we mean business. Where's he going to play? I don't know if his game fits as great on the outside, because I think he lacks a little vertical speed. I almost like him in a bigger slot, right, where you can run behind him. He can be kind of physical with traditionally smaller slot cornerbacks, or they're going to have to force a safety or a linebacker kind of more into that box situation to guard him. You can run receiver screens, throw kind of smoke screens behind him and let him be physical out there as a lead blocker. So I think maybe that's where Chris Brooks lines up. I'm very interested to see how they use him this year. I think he played well enough in camp that he's going to force his way into some reps this year. I just don't know where, right? Maybe it will be on the outside. He definitely lined up a lot out there as well. They tried some double moves with him. They tried some deep balls with him, maybe with the idea that his physical ability, he could just kind of box out, but he just doesn't get a ton of separation on the deep routes. I don't think that's fully his game, but I think he can be a problem coming out of the slot where he has a bit of a two-way go, right? And he can just kind of get on the inside of cornerbacks. He can kind of come across the field, create some 3rd and 5 type catches where he moves the sticks. So that's where I'm interested mostly in the receiver spot. Let's go inside linebackers. Again, another just interesting depth chart here. Man, I tell you, Jake Chaney came back and he looked fast. He looked quick. I think he's going to give you some of what Chris Orr gave you. That really good Chris Orr year where he was disruptive on the inside. So that was Sanborn. We've had so many good linebackers. my internal mental linebacker Badger Rolodex is flipping through its cards right now. But I think Cheney's gonna have a really good year. I think it's gonna be him and Thomas primarily on the inside, at least kind of in base downs. And then who else, right? Who's your two deep? At the beginning of camp at practice, or at least during the transfer market, I would have said, yeah, it's probably Tackett and maybe Allegro. And now it might be Jancy and Allegro. I think Allegro's too physical not to play. There was a blitz in the last practice, the open practice, where he just put Brunner on his bottoms. He's a really physical player. Again, we talked to Jackson Naker. I've mentioned this before, but who are the hardest hitting linebackers? Who are the hardest hitting people on defense? He said Latu. He said Allegro, right? Like he said Allegro and Jancy, actually, in terms of the linebackers, are the two hardest hitting guys. Think of that linebacker room. Think of Lowry, Peterson, Jaheim Thomas, Cheney, Tackett Curtis, right? There's some dudes there who are the hardest hitting guys. Allegro and Jancy. I think those are your next two up on the inside. I think ahead of Tackett. Until Tackett can really, I think he's still been knocking off some rust. This is a guy who's missed a ton of time since he left high school as that ultra blue chip inside linebacker, outside linebacker out of Manny, Louisiana high school. He's just been beset with injuries, and I don't think it's fully knocked all the rust off yet. Maybe that's just me making excuses because I love the kid's high school film. Like, I've raved about it. It broke my heart when he went to USC the first time. I've talked to his coach a couple times, so like I'm definitely a fan there. But it feels like the other guys have made a few more plays and been a little more consistent. So I think that inside linebacker rotation, I think you're looking at Cheney and Thomas, and I'm telling you, I think Cheney's going to have a big year. I know I'm the high guy on Cheney. I know I came out of last year telling people Cheney is the best linebacker we have. I know I've been hyping. He looked really good, and I think there is a reason when you again follow. Don't always trust what coaches say. Trust what they do, and they've consistently, when they've had opportunities, put Cheney in the starters, right? Even after these transfers come over, I think he's really going to have a good year this year. But I think that next group, it's Allegro and Jancy. I'm really excited to see what Jancy can continue blossoming into. That's a physical inside linebacker. And if you pair him with Allegro, who's also a really hard hitter who can move, this linebacker room is no shortage of options. All right, we're going to take a break there. We'll come back and talk about pass rushers. Who do I think that pass rush grouping may be for the Badgers this year? But first, let's take a quick break for our friends of the show over at eBay Motors. eBay Motors remains the number one source for all of your car needs. We've talked about it. Keep your ride or die alive. Listen, your ride or die's there for you all the time, man. You wake up at 2 a.m. with a case of the munchies. You go put the keys in the old ride or die. She fires right up for you, right? She's sleeping too, but she's good. She's got you. You got to go to the old quickie trip, man. Get some chips, get some salsa. Do what you can to keep your ride or die alive, because your ride or die keeps you going. And if you need the right parts and you want the right fit and you want the best prices, you got to do it at eBay Motors. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Over 122 million parts over at eBay Motors. With them, you're burning rubber. You're not burning cash. And there's no downside. Like, I shouldn't even have to sell this to y'all. Like, you should be doing this anyway. Why would you get dressed up and drive to some car parts store who doesn't have what they need by some guy who doesn't want to be there to get a part that probably isn't the best fit at a price that's inflated because they have to ship it to that place? Just go to eBay Motors, man. Keep your ride or die alive. The right parts, the right fit, the right prices. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. Okay, let's talk pass rushers. It's one of my favorite things. Let's talk pass rushers. Who do I think is going to be in that pass rushing set? When Wisconsin, and again, man, we're not going to get too deep into formations because we saw a bunch of different ones in practice, and there's a bunch of different ways they can go, right? They could have one defensive lineman, they could have three, they could have a 2-4-5. They could maybe add a second or sixth defensive back and just have three linebackers. I'm going to just say in a 2-4-5, who do I think the top pass rushing options are there? And again, this could branch off in a lot of different directions, right? But let's say 2-4-5, who do I think that grouping right now might be? And this is not easy. With those linebackers, this is not easy. But this is what I settled on. And please let me know in the comments if you disagree, if you think it's going to be someone else. I don't know, but let me know. On the defense line, I got Thompson and Neal. So Thompson gives you length. He can be disruptive in the passing game. Neal, I thought, looked pretty good. He's more disruptive, a little lower center of gravity, gets a little burstier off the line of scrimmage, can actually get into the pocket a little bit. made a couple plays in practice that I was watching. Brandon Lane could get into this grouping as well. Maybe it's Lane and Curtis Neal as pass rushers. And then at the linebackers, I got Pius and Thomas on the outside. This is something Coach Mitchell talked about a couple times. Like, we will move Jaheim Thomas around. And I think it's very possible pass rushing situations, he moves to the outside. And then you have Pius on the other side. And on the inside, I think it might be Cheney and Allegro. I'm telling you, I think Cheney is going to be disruptive on the inside, and Allegro just packs a pop. So I think maybe it's Pius, Cheney, Allegro, Thomas, and then Lowry. That means no Lowry, no Daryl Peterson, no Tackett Curtis. But I don't know. It's going to be tough, man. That's going to be a really tough group to crack. Now, it's certainly possible. Again, they take another linebacker. Maybe that's a Leon Lowry, and they put his hand in the dirt, right, and use him as a pass rusher, and then still put those at linebackers kind of flanking him. So that's going to be one of the interesting things with this coaching staff. How do they deploy these different linebackers, these different chess pieces? And you're also going to see safety blitzes because we've seen it in practice all week. Wohler coming off the edge, Moore coming off the edge, Zachman coming off the edge. They definitely are going to be more disruptive this year because I think they have more pieces to make it work. The last thing I want to start with or end with was Coach Fickell talking about the young guys that are going to play. And I want to just give my quick take on which players are going to burn their red shirts this year. Here's who I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be Dylan and Dupree. I think it's going to be Mandel and Haywood. I think it's going to be Xavier Lucas. And I think it's going to be Lafayette. I think you're going to have those 6 that burn their red shirts. And partially because there's players there that you need to get ready for next season. You have to get some of these offensive linemen ready for next year because Nelson, Malman, Renfro, there's a lot of guys leaving, right? You have to get Xavier Lucas ready for next year because Nizer Forkran, probably Rico, Max Lofi, there's a lot of corners leaving. You got to get the running backs ready for next year. Again, Ches, Tywee, there's guys leaving. So I think those 5 are pretty universally agreed on. Haywood, Mandel, Lucas, the 2 running backs. And I'm going to add in Lafayette because he has looked so disruptive. I don't think they're going to keep him on the sidelines. And if you have a really good player, this is just kind of the new college football, man. If you have a really good player who comes in physically ready and he shows the flashes, they're not going to be here 4 years anyway. If this is the beginning of Lafayette and he's only going to get better from here on out, and what we saw in practice was at times one of the more disruptive players as a true freshman, he's not going to be here 4 years. Unless he loves it. Like, if he wants to stick in Madison, I'm not going to tell him no. But he's probably going to be a guy that can leave as a junior if he continues on the track that I think he might. So you might as well get him reps. You might as well get him in there, get another set of fresh legs, and just put him in some spots where it's literally go hunt, right? Go see quarterback, go get quarterback, where he doesn't have to think a whole lot and he can just get some reps, give some of the other guys some fresh legs. Another player where if Wisconsin can get in some blowout situations or some comfortable situations, then you could turn to Lafayette and keep your starters a little more fresh for the grind of the year. So I would say those 6. Who's on the cusp? Colin Cupperly, who is in the 2 deep with the offensive line. I think he's absolutely on the cusp as a guy who could get past those 4 games. Injuries are going to play a part there. Health of the starters is going to play a part there, but that wouldn't shock me whatsoever. Grant Steck is a guy that wouldn't shock me because tight end is not the deepest spot. And I can kind of see them going the Tucker Ashcraft route from last year and just, we want to get Steck reps. We want to get him going so we can see, see what we have there, but B, get him ready for next year and kind of accelerate that growth a little bit. He's another player. He's got the physical size. Now, he was getting a lot of reps at the 3, so there's things that are going to have to happen for that to take place, but that one wouldn't shock me either. Thomas Heiberger is a guy that would have done it. I think he absolutely would have played in over 4 games, but the injury is going to set him back a little bit. So I think you're looking at that group of players who I'm pretty sure will or potentially will to get past that 4-game red shirt. That 24 class is good. It's really good. When you're talking about a big group of them, I think you're going to see significant chunks of playing time this year. With that, we're going to wrap it up when you're done here. Go check out Locked On College Football. Listen, he's got you covered everything. NIL deals, conference realignment. Spencer has you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. Go find him on the Locked On College Football podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to say thank you to everybody tuning in. Appreciate y'all so much. Some fun interviews coming up this week. You're not going to want to miss it. On Wisconsin, and we will talk later.